Oscar Orange. Oscar Orange was handsome, well-dressed, intelligent, successful and fearless. Everyone liked him. He lived in a big house and should have been very happy. But he was not. And the reason for this was that he was terribly small. His friends said, "What does it matter if you're small? It doesn't make you any less handsome or clever." But Oscar secretly worried about his height and decided that before another year had passed, he would have grown 5 centimeters taller. He thought about it all the time and made secret plans. First, he tried eating more and drinking lots of milk. But although this made him stronger and perhaps a little fatter, he did not grow one tiny bit taller. His belt felt rather tight and uncomfortable, so he had to give up overeating. Then he had another brilliant idea. If he hung from a bough of the apple tree for an hour each day, he would be sure to stretch. Poor Oscar. He only became very red in the face and got large blisters on his hands. "I know," thought Oscar one evening while he was sitting at supper. "Plants grow well in manure. Why shouldn't I?" So early the next morning, before anyone was about, he crept up to Mr. Rake's manure heap and carefully filled his shoes. "Now I'll really grow," he said. What a smell! Penelope Strawberry put her lace handkerchief over her nose as she hurried by. The Pea Twins were nearly sick, and Alice Apple hurriedly climbed to the top of her tree as Oscar passed beneath her. Even the birds and insects avoided him. "Whatever does he think he's up to?" cried Patrick Pear, holding his breath as he tried to fish in a plastic bucket. In fact, all the garden gang agreed that he smelt horrid, and wondered how they could tell him without hurting his feelings. "It's really too bad of him," they said. But they were even more alarmed when they saw what he did next. He filled a large watering can and began to pour the cold water all over himself. "Whatever are you doing?" they all shouted. "I'm growing," replied Oscar with a smile. But was he? Oscar stood dripping onto the floor as Mark Marrow brought out a ruler to measure him. And do you know, he had not grown one tiny bit. He burst into floods of tears and sat sobbing in the grass. How sad they all were to see him so upset. "You really don't need to be tall to be well-liked and successful," said Peter Potato. "But if that's what you want, I suppose we can think of something. In fact, I have rather a good idea." As you know, Peter Potato was very good at making things, and away he went to his shed. Peter soon reappeared, carrying a pair of very special shoes. They were big and black and shiny. Oscar put them on and smartly strutted across the garden. Everyone cheered and felt pleased as they saw his happy, smiling face. At last his secret wish had been granted. He had become 5 centimeters taller.
And this story is called Augustus Aubergine. Augustus was a cute little aubergine. His family had brought him over from Rome, in Italy, when he was a baby. He lived by the fountain in a little stone house, which he called his villa, and he always wore a Roman toga and sandals, because it made him feel important. Mind you, he was not very often seen during the daytime, and the garden gang thought him a little odd. In fact, they thought him rather mysterious, because he was often to be seen prowling about after dark, and many of the garden gang children said that he was a magician.
Perhaps he's shy,
said Roger Radish, remembering the days when he used to hide from everyone. Oh, I don't think so, said Pam Parsnip. I once met him when I was out walking in the woods, and I found him perfectly charming. He's such a gentleman. They became more curious when they passed his house each day and heard him snoring inside. Why doesn't he come out in the daytime, like everybody else? They thought. I don't know how he can bear to miss the fresh air and sunshine, said Bertie Brussels Sprout, who was always doing keep fit exercises. Then came the tapping noises. Every evening, and sometimes through the night, the sound of tapping and hammering was heard coming from Augustus's garden. This went on for weeks. No one dared to ask him what he was doing. They all decided to peep through his hedge one evening after dark. It would be fun. All the next day, the excitement in the garden grew. Fruit and vegetable people were seen in small groups, talking or whispering together. They could hardly wait for the evening to come, and the great adventure they felt sure they were going to have. Why did Augustus sleep through the day and work at night? That night, it really was funny to see all the garden gang creeping along in the dark behind Augustus Aubergine's garden hedge. Of course, the Pea twins managed to fall over each other, and everyone, including the strict Gertrude Gooseberry, began to giggle. People always start to giggle when they try to be serious. How they giggled! First it was softly, and then it grew louder and louder, ending up with them all rolling about in the grass, holding their sides. Augustus Aubergine peered through his hedge in astonishment. He could hardly believe his eyes. "Do come into my garden," he said shyly, and in they all tramped. "I'm so glad you've come," he said. "There is something special I would like you to see." He asked them to follow him and led them to a small round building he had built. It had a glass top, rather like a bubble. "This is my observatory," he said. "You may slide back the top and take a look, one at a time." Inside was a massive telescope, and each one in turn was allowed to look through the eyepiece and peer into the night sky. So this is why he came out at night. He watched the stars. Augustus explained all the things they could see, and their eyes grew wide with wonder. They saw mountains on the moon, Jupiter with its multicolored bands and 4 bright moons, Saturn with its rings, galaxies with spirals and balls of millions of stars, and glowing patches of multicolored gas. They were fascinated, and now they realized that their mysterious Augustus Aubergine was a great astronomer.